At 41, Prince Harry has finally broken his silence. The words he chose, the pauses he left hanging, the emotions barely contained. All of it is enough to make the world stop for a moment. But what exactly did he reveal? And why now, after years of restraint, careful statements, and carefully curated public appearances? It's a question that has kept royal watchers and casual observers alike on the edge of their seats, and the answer is more shocking than most could have imagined. Harry's revelation isn't just about royal protocol or private family disputes. No, it goes far deeper. It scratches at the very foundation of trust, loyalty, and love, touching not only his marriage but the complex web that surrounds it. And at the center of this web, unexpectedly, is a name that most people haven't paid much attention to: Markus Anderson. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. You've likely heard the rumors. Headlines that barely whisper, social media posts that explode with speculation, and tabloid stories that never quite seem to line up. But what Harry has revealed goes beyond the headlines. It cuts past the conjecture and dives into a reality that's been hidden from public view, a reality that involves betrayal, secrecy, and a love triangle that has shocked even the most seasoned royal commentators. And it's a reality that has consequences far beyond personal heartbreak, reverberating through the monarchy, the media, and the global public consciousness. Imagine, for a moment, living a life in which your every move is scrutinized, every smile, every gesture, every expression of emotion dissected in public forums by millions of strangers. That has been Harry's reality for decades. But now, he has chosen to step forward. He has chosen to speak. And in doing so, he has opened a door that no one knows how to close again. So why now? Why speak out at the age of 41, after years of silence and careful diplomacy? The answer isn't simple. It isn't just about correcting narratives or defending a loved one's honor. It's about reclaiming a personal truth that has been buried under layers of expectation, media distortion, and public perception. Harry's voice, once muffled by protocol, fear, and responsibility, is finally emerging. And with it comes a story that is equal parts heartbreaking and explosive, a story that challenges everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle, Markus Anderson, and the delicate balance of love and loyalty within the royal sphere. Markus Anderson, a man whose name has floated quietly at the edges of media speculation, is suddenly a central figure in this narrative. Who is he really? What role did he play in the events that have left the palace shaken and the public enthralled? Details are sparse, and yet, as Harry begins to speak, the pieces start to fall into place. Markus isn't merely a footnote. He is a key to understanding the tension, the intrigue, and the emotional turmoil that has defined the last several years of Harry and Meghan's public and private lives. And Meghan, how does she fit into this? The world has known her as a confident, stylish, and sometimes controversial public figure. She's been both adored and criticized, celebrated for her charitable work and scrutinized for her choices. But behind the public persona, as Harry reveals, there are layers of complexity that few could have anticipated. The intersection of love, betrayal, secrecy, and ambition creates a tangled web, and Harry is now untangling it for all of us, piece by piece. This story is not just about gossip or scandal. It is about human emotion, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. It's about a man who grew up in the spotlight, who faced loss and expectation, and who finally chooses to voice the truth he has carried silently for years. And it's about the consequences of secrets and the way they ripple outward, affecting not just those directly involved, but everyone who watches from afar. So why should you care? Because this is not just a story about royalty. It is a story about power, love, loyalty, and the cost of keeping silent. It is a story that mirrors aspects of our own lives: the fear of speaking out, the pain of betrayal, and the complicated reality of navigating relationships when the stakes are impossibly high. And perhaps most importantly, it is a story that challenges our assumptions, forcing us to question what we think we know about people we admire, trust, or even love from afar. As Harry begins to speak, we are drawn into the tension. Every word is measured yet laden with meaning. Every pause, every look, carries a weight that is almost unbearable. And as we listen, we can't help but ask ourselves, What was left unsaid for so long? What truths were hidden beneath layers of decorum, loyalty, and fear? And most provocatively, what happens next? Because the story does not end with Harry's confession. It only begins there. Every revelation he shares raises more questions, sparks more speculation, and sets the stage for events that no one could have predicted. Markus Anderson's role, Meghan's reactions, and the broader implications for the royal family create a narrative that is impossible to turn away from. And as the layers are peeled back, one thing becomes painfully clear: nothing is as it seems. The public has long speculated about rifts, disagreements, and the supposed fallout between Harry and Meghan and the rest of the royal family. But what Harry shares now reframes everything. What seemed like simple disagreements or personal struggles is revealed to be part of a more intricate and dramatic story. A story that involves hidden alliances, miscommunications, and a series of choices that have had lasting emotional impact. And at the heart of it all is a decision, one that Harry has carried silently until now. The tension is palpable. You can feel it in every interaction, every carefully chosen word, and every moment of silence. Harry's revelations aren't just facts. They are emotional truths. They reveal the human cost of fame, scrutiny, and love complicated by circumstance. And as we sit with these revelations, we begin to understand why this moment, right here and now, is so important. Because it is not just about correcting the record. It is about reclaiming agency, telling one's own story, and finally confronting the realities that have been too long ignored. And yet, even as Harry speaks, the story is far from complete. Markus Anderson's true role, the full extent of Meghan's involvement, and the underlying motivations that have driven these events remain shrouded in mystery, revealed only in fragments, teased out slowly to maintain the tension and suspense. It is this very unfolding drama that keeps us glued to every word, every sentence, every revelation. We are compelled not just by curiosity, but by the emotional stakes. By the end of this introduction, you will understand why Harry's silence was never just about restraint. It was about survival. It was about protecting those he loved while navigating a world that is relentlessly unforgiving. And it was about preparing for the moment when the truth, finally, could be told in his own words. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. For years, Prince Harry carried a silence that weighed heavier than any crown. The public saw him as the charming, rebellious royal, someone who could make the world laugh with a cheeky smile, yet harbor secrets and sorrows no one could imagine. But behind the carefully curated appearances, the meticulously managed interviews, and the polished royal duties, there was a man quietly shouldering a burden. A burden born not just from fame, but from expectation, loss, and a life where privacy was a luxury he never had. What is it like to grow up under a microscope? To have every mistake magnified, every smile scrutinized, and every tear cataloged in headlines? Imagine a world where your existence is not entirely your own. For Harry, that was life from the beginning. Even before Meghan, before Markus Anderson became a name whispered in connection with his private world, Harry lived a life defined by observation, speculation, and an unending pressure to perform. But silence, his silence, was a choice. It was a protective measure, a way to survive the constant gaze of the public and the relentless scrutiny of the press. And yet, silence is not neutral. Silence carries its own weight. For Harry, it was a shield, yes, but also a chain. A chain that wrapped tighter with every rumor, every mischaracterization, and every headline that twisted truth into spectacle. Imagine having the truth at your fingertips, but being unable to speak it aloud. Imagine knowing your narrative is being written by others, people who don't care about nuance, context, or the human cost. That was Harry's reality, and it left scars that no one could see. He remembers, vividly, the nights when the headlines screamed something untrue about him, Meghan, or even the palace itself. The kind of stories that make the world point fingers while ignoring the human being behind the words. And what do you do when the world reacts not to facts, but to a carefully spun narrative designed to generate clicks and outrage? You remain silent. You endure. You hope that truth, somehow, will find its way through. But endurance has limits. And Harry's limit was tested repeatedly. Personal loss, the death of his mother, Princess Diana, was only the beginning. From there, a lifetime of expectation, responsibility, and scrutiny compounded every pain, magnified every mistake, and made even the simplest decisions agonizingly public. Imagine falling in love and having that love dissected on a global scale. Imagine arguing in private, only to see the argument reconstructed in tabloids the next day. Imagine having your loyalty questioned in front of millions, your motives doubted by those who will never know your heart. That is what silence demanded of Harry. Constant vigilance, self-censorship, and emotional restraint that no one else could understand. And then came Meghan. Everything shifted, or at least it appeared to outsiders that way. For Harry, Meghan represented both freedom and risk, a chance to reclaim some semblance of control over his narrative, over his heart. Yet even as he fell in love, the burden of silence persisted. Every public appearance, every interview, every seemingly small interaction was carefully weighed. What could be said? What must remain unsaid? What consequences would ripple through the palace, the media, and the world? We often think of silence as passive, but Harry's silence was active. It was deliberate. It was a strategy for survival. But it was also a prison. And every day he remained quiet. The walls of that prison grew taller, the weight grew heavier, and the cost grew higher. How do you measure the impact of silence on a human soul? On a marriage? On a family torn between love and duty? Harry's story forces us to ask these questions because he lived them in real time, under public scrutiny that few could ever comprehend. The silence wasn't merely a personal choice. It was also about protection. Protecting Meghan, protecting family relationships, protecting the delicate balance of a life lived under constant observation. He carried the weight of knowing that one misstep could shatter reputations, inflame the press, and even endanger relationships. Silence was the armor that allowed him to navigate this complex, perilous world. But armor can be suffocating, and eventually, it can crack. And cracks did appear. The tension between silence and truth, between public perception and private reality, began to grow impossible to bear. The world thought Harry's problems were minor, or at least manageable. Another royal scandal here, another controversial interview there. But those who know the truth understand that the pressure was immense. Every day was a negotiation between duty and desire, between restraint and the overwhelming need to speak. And it was during this time, amid the unrelenting scrutiny, that whispers of Markus Anderson began to surface. Not in the headlines, not in tabloids, but in private conversations, in moments where the world's gaze could not reach. Markus's presence complicated Harry's silence, not because Markus was inherently problematic, but because he represented a truth that Harry could no longer ignore, a reality that had been simmering beneath layers of secrecy and speculation. And Harry understood that speaking this truth would carry consequences far beyond his own life. It would ripple outward, affecting those he loved, those he had sworn to protect, and a global audience that hung on every word. So he stayed quiet. He endured. He watched, and he waited for the right moment, a moment when speaking would not just be necessary, but transformative. Silence, he realized, was both a weapon and a cage. And sometimes, the longer you hold it, the more explosive the eventual release becomes. But silence also teaches you. It forces reflection, fosters understanding, and sharpens perception. Harry had years of silent observation. He knew who could be trusted, who had hidden motives, and what truths were worth revealing. And as the moment to speak approached, he carried with him not just pain and anger, but clarity. A clarity born from watching, listening, and feeling the sting of betrayal and misunderstanding. He also carried fear. Speaking out could backfire. It could inflame old wounds. It could alienate allies and embolden critics. Yet Harry recognized that some truths cannot remain buried forever. Some stories demand to be told, no matter the risk. And with that understanding, he began to prepare. To organize his thoughts, to frame his narrative, and to choose words that would resonate with the world without sacrificing the integrity of his message. Every sentence, every pause, every carefully considered phrase was a product of years of restraint. And yet, the emotional weight behind them was undeniable. The vulnerability he displayed was not theatrical. It was raw, human, and painfully honest. This was the man who had survived loss, scrutiny, and betrayal, finally allowing himself to speak, to be heard, and to reclaim his own story. As Harry begins to reveal what has been hidden for so long, we are forced to confront uncomfortable questions. How do you balance love and loyalty when secrecy becomes a necessity? How do you navigate relationships that exist under the unrelenting gaze of the world? And most importantly, what happens when the truth is finally allowed to see the light? It is a delicate balance, one that Harry has walked for years. But now, the silence is ending. And with the end of silence comes revelation. Details that were once whispers in the shadows are now brought into the light, reframed by Harry's perspective and colored by emotion, context, and human complexity. The burden he carried alone is now shared, not to lessen the weight, but to illuminate the story in its full, dramatic, and often shocking scope. The world will remember this silence, and it will remember the moment it ended. Because when Harry finally spoke, it was not just words that were released. It was truth, emotion, history, and consequence all rolled into one. And that truth begins to reveal the tangled connections, hidden motives, and emotional stakes involving Meghan, Marcus, and the entire royal narrative. But what comes next? The reactions, the revelations, and the truths that have been simmering just below the surface will change everything. And no one, not even those closest to Harry, saw it coming. Few names in the royal saga have carried as much quiet intrigue as Markus Anderson. To the average observer, he was just a footnote, a mysterious figure appearing occasionally in rumors, whispers, and speculative articles. But to Prince Harry, Marcus was far more than that. His presence, whether subtle or overt, played a role in a story that was deeply personal, emotionally charged, and utterly transformative. And now, for the first time, Harry has chosen to shed light on the man behind the whispers, revealing layers of truth that have long remained hidden from public view. Who is Markus Anderson? That question has lingered for years, unanswered and clouded by speculation. Some have described him as charming, enigmatic, or even manipulative. Others dismissed him as a mere acquaintance, a passing figure in a life dominated by royal obligations and public attention. But Harry's revelation changes that narrative entirely. Marcus was neither peripheral nor incidental. His involvement in the unfolding story of Harry and Meghan was profound, affecting not just private moments but the emotional landscape of their relationship and, ultimately, the dynamics within the royal family itself. The first time Marcus entered the periphery of Harry's world, the circumstances seemed innocuous. He was introduced through mutual connections, part of social circles that intertwined with celebrities, philanthropists, and high-profile figures. On the surface, there was nothing remarkable about the introduction. Yet, even in those early interactions, Harry noted subtle nuances. Marcus's charisma, the ease with which he navigated complex social situations, and the almost imperceptible way he seemed to influence the mood of a room. There was something magnetic about him, a quality that drew attention without demanding it, and Harry sensed early on that Marcus was more than he seemed. Over time, Marcus became a figure whose presence could not be ignored. He attended events, engaged in conversations, and became intertwined, in ways subtle and overt, with the circles Harry and Meghan moved in. To the public, it might have looked like casual acquaintance or coincidence. But behind closed doors, Marcus represented a variable, a complicating factor, and in some ways, a catalyst for tension. His interactions with Meghan, in particular, sparked questions that Harry could not simply dismiss. There was something about Marcus that seemed to draw Meghan in, creating moments that, while innocent on the surface, carried undercurrents Harry could feel but could not always articulate. As Harry reflects on this period, he acknowledges the complexity of emotions involved. Marcus was never simply the other man, in the sense of a villain or antagonist. Rather, his presence highlighted vulnerabilities, insecurities, and dynamics within Harry and Meghan's relationship that had gone unspoken. It is in these nuances, the fleeting glances, the charged conversations, the subtle shifts in attention, that the story begins to take shape. Marcus's role was not one of overt malice but of influence, of presence, of catalyzing reactions that might otherwise have remained dormant. Public perception, of course, lagged far behind reality. To the outside world, Marcus was a shadowy figure at the edge of social events, barely acknowledged and often mischaracterized. But Harry's account forces a reevaluation. Marcus was a player in the story precisely because of the emotional and psychological impact he had on those around him. It was not merely about physical presence or social visibility. It was about the intangible effect he had on relationships, trust, and the delicate balance of emotions that defined Harry and Meghan's world. There were moments, Harry recalls, that tested boundaries and created tension. Marcus had a way of entering a room, engaging with Meghan, and eliciting responses that left Harry unsettled, not in a confrontational sense, but in a way that stirred uncertainty, doubt, and reflection. These moments were small, almost imperceptible, yet cumulative. Over time, they created a landscape of heightened awareness and emotional vigilance, in which every interaction carried weight, every conversation a potential trigger for misunderstanding or suspicion. The intrigue surrounding Marcus was compounded by his ability to remain enigmatic. He did not overshare, nor did he seek attention. Yet, paradoxically, his very restraint and mystery made him the subject of fascination. Harry noticed how easily Marcus could navigate conversations, draw people in, and then vanish from scrutiny with minimal trace. There was an elegance to his social maneuvering, an ability to exist both centrally and peripherally, shaping dynamics without overt interference. It is this paradox that made Marcus both compelling and, ultimately, destabilizing. But what about Meghan? How did she perceive Marcus, and why did his presence matter to Harry? According to Harry, Meghan's interactions with Marcus were nuanced, layered with subtleties that could be misinterpreted by those outside the circle. On one hand, Marcus was a confidant, someone with whom she could discuss ideas, ambitions, and frustrations. On the other hand, his presence illuminated cracks in Harry and Meghan's private world, unspoken tensions, vulnerabilities, and insecurities that had previously been manageable but now demanded attention. It is crucial to understand that Marcus's influence was not about direct interference or betrayal in the conventional sense. Rather, it was about the emotional resonance he carried, the way he highlighted what Harry describes as unspoken dynamics in the relationship. Marcus became a mirror, reflecting concerns, fears, and desires that Harry may not have fully acknowledged until they were magnified by the intensity of proximity. In this sense, Marcus was both catalyst and reflection, a figure whose role was psychological, emotional, and deeply human. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Marcus's involvement cannot be reduced to a simple narrative of villainy or intrigue. He was a participant in a complex interplay of emotions, circumstances, and human decisions. The question is not whether Marcus had intentions, but how his presence interacted with the existing dynamics of Harry and Meghan's world. The subtleties of influence, perception, and emotional resonance become central to understanding why Harry felt compelled to speak at last. Public speculation has often sought a clear-cut answer. Was Marcus the cause of tension, the instigator, or the catalyst for a deeper betrayal? Harry's revelation complicates this narrative. Marcus, as he explains, was neither hero nor villain but a human being navigating relationships with his own intentions, desires, and flaws. The true story, Harry emphasizes, is about the intersection of personalities, choices, and timing, a confluence of factors that created tension, uncertainty, and ultimately, revelation. What does this mean for the larger narrative of Harry and Meghan's life together? It means that human relationships are rarely simple. It means that influence can be subtle yet powerful, that presence can be disruptive even when intentions are not malicious. And it means that speaking out, after years of silence, is not an act of accusation but of clarification, an attempt to illuminate the emotional truths that have been misrepresented or misunderstood by public speculation. And now, with Markus Anderson finally coming into focus, the story is poised to reveal not just his involvement, but the ripple effects on trust, loyalty, and emotional stability. The nuances of his interactions with Meghan, the subtle tensions with Harry, and the impact on the broader narrative of the royal family create a story that is both deeply personal and globally compelling. But as Harry's revelations continue, one thing becomes clear. Markus Anderson's role is only the beginning. What seems subtle on the surface carries consequences far beyond initial perception, and the emotional, psychological, and social reverberations of his presence are yet to be fully understood. The intrigue, tension, and complexity of these dynamics set the stage for the revelations that will follow, truths that no one outside the private circle could have anticipated. And just when it seems that the puzzle might start to make sense, another layer emerges. Another twist in the story that challenges assumptions, ignites questions, and leaves both Harry and the world grappling with what is real and what is perception. Because the story of Markus Anderson, as Harry now tells it, is far from complete, and what comes next will change everything. Meghan Markle, a name that evokes fascination, admiration, controversy, and endless speculation. For Prince Harry, she has been love, partner, ally, and, at times, a lightning rod for public scrutiny. But who is she beyond the headlines, beyond the carefully staged photographs, the glamorous appearances, and the curated interviews? Who is she in private moments, when the cameras are off and the world isn't watching? According to Harry, understanding Meghan is key to understanding the complex, often misunderstood story that involves Markus Anderson, the royal family, and the intense emotional terrain Harry has navigated for years. From the moment Harry first met Meghan, there was a spark. One that drew him in, ignited his curiosity, and, in ways he could not immediately articulate, changed his trajectory. But the attraction was not merely physical or superficial. Meghan brought with her a mix of intelligence, vulnerability, ambition, and authenticity that both intrigued and challenged Harry. She was someone who could navigate public life with grace while also asserting her individuality, and this combination was magnetic. But magnetism, Harry quickly realized, can be a double-edged sword. The public, of course, saw a fairy tale romance. A prince meets an actress, love blossoms, and a modern-day royal story unfolds. But the reality was far more layered. Meghan's presence intensified the pressures Harry already faced. Her fame, her independent career, and her distinct perspective on life added new dimensions to the scrutiny he endured. Suddenly, their relationship was not just about two people in love. It was a high-stakes dance played out under global observation, with every misstep magnified, every word analyzed, and every action judged. And then came Markus Anderson. Markus was not an antagonist in the conventional sense, but his presence complicated the delicate balance Harry and Meghan were trying to maintain. Meghan's interactions with Markus, while not overtly alarming, introduced subtle tensions. It was the kind of tension that often goes unnoticed by outsiders, but can be deeply felt by those living it. Harry describes these interactions as charged moments, instances where the simplest exchanges carried weight far beyond their surface meaning. In these moments, trust, attention, and emotional boundaries became fluid, malleable, and fragile. Harry also reflects on the impact of public perception on Meghan. The world loves to assign narratives to people in the spotlight, often reducing complex human beings into simplified caricatures. Meghan, he says, was frequently misrepresented, as manipulative, as calculating, or as ambitious in ways that seemed threatening. But the truth, as Harry reveals, is far more nuanced. Meghan's decisions, her demeanor, and her interactions with others, including Markus, were informed by context, emotion, and personal experience, not by some hidden agenda to destabilize relationships. Yet, perception is reality in the court of public opinion. And for Harry, navigating the gap between who Meghan truly is and who the world perceives her to be was a constant struggle. Every move she made, every comment, every gesture, was scrutinized not just for its content, but for the way it reflected on him. The pressure was immense. Imagine loving someone so deeply, yet having to constantly filter their actions through the lens of a global audience. Imagine feeling protective, frustrated, and anxious, all at once, because you know the world is watching, judging, and ready to twist reality into scandal. That was Harry's daily experience. In private, Meghan was a source of both comfort and complexity. She challenged Harry in ways he needed, asking difficult questions, encouraging reflection, and sometimes pushing him to confront truths he might have avoided. At the same time, her presence magnified existing insecurities. Marcus, intentionally or not, became a mirror in this dynamic, a figure whose interactions with Meghan highlighted vulnerabilities, emotional blind spots, and areas where Harry had to confront his own fears. It was not simple jealousy, Harry emphasizes, but a profound awareness of the intricacies of human connection and the stakes involved when personal lives are inseparable from public scrutiny. One of the most striking aspects Harry shares is the way Meghan handled pressure. Despite the scrutiny, she remained assertive, articulate, and unapologetic about her ambitions. She was conscious of the media, aware of the narratives being spun, and yet committed to staying true to her own identity. For Harry, this was both inspiring and challenging. It demanded emotional maturity, constant reflection, and, at times, painful confrontation with his own assumptions. The couple's dynamic was further complicated by expectations from the royal family and the media. Harry had grown up understanding the intricate choreography of royal life, while Meghan had to learn it quickly, often under intense pressure. Every decision they made, from charitable endeavors to public appearances, was analyzed for intent, impact, and optics. Markus Anderson, as Harry recounts, became an unexpected variable in this complex environment, a reminder that personal connections do not exist in isolation, especially when filtered through public scrutiny. Yet, amidst all this, Harry emphasizes the depth of their bond. The love he shares with Meghan is profound, but it is not immune to the realities of life in the public eye. The challenges they faced were amplified by external forces, media narratives, public expectations, and the shadows of Marcus's presence. These factors created tension, emotional strain, and moments of doubt. But they also created opportunities for growth, reflection, and understanding. Harry describes moments of private frustration, where he had to balance protection, trust, and communication. Marcus's interactions with Meghan were not always easy to interpret, and the ambiguity of human behavior created fertile ground for anxiety and concern. Harry often found himself questioning intentions, assessing boundaries, and reflecting on the emotional landscape of his relationships. This process was exhausting, yet necessary, and it ultimately shaped his decision to speak publicly about these matters. In discussing Meghan, Harry also addresses the role of external judgment. The media, he notes, has a way of simplifying complex relationships into digestible, often misleading narratives. Meghan, as a result, was frequently misunderstood, misrepresented, and vilified in ways that did not reflect her true character or intentions. Marcus's involvement, though subtle, became a focal point for speculation, further complicating public perception and adding emotional strain to Harry and Meghan's private life. Throughout it all, Harry emphasizes that his goal in speaking out is not to assign blame or vilify individuals. Instead, it is to illuminate the truth of human relationships, the emotional realities of love under scrutiny, and the complex interplay of personalities, choices, and circumstances. Meghan, in this narrative, is neither perfect nor villainous. She is human, multifaceted, and profoundly influential in shaping the story that Harry is now ready to tell. But the complexities do not end with character and perception. They extend into the timing, context, and consequences of interactions with Marcus and others in their social orbit. Every action, every decision, reverberates beyond the moment, creating chains of cause and effect that shape the emotional terrain. Harry's decision to speak is, in part, a response to this reality, the need to contextualize, clarify, and illuminate the story as it truly unfolded. And so, as we explore the Meghan factor, it becomes clear that this is not merely a story of love or scandal. It is a story of human complexity, emotional depth, and the challenges of navigating relationships under extraordinary circumstances. Markus Anderson's role, the pressures of public life, and the intensity of personal connection all converge to create a narrative that is as compelling as it is revealing. But just when it seems we are beginning to understand the dynamics at play, another revelation looms on the horizon, one that will challenge assumptions, ignite questions, and leave both Harry and the world grappling with the unexpected consequences of hidden truths. Because in the world of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, nothing is ever quite as it seems. And the next revelation, hidden in plain sight, is about to change everything. Rumors, whispers, half-truths is circulating in hushed tones across social media, tabloids, and even high society circles. They have a strange power. They can shape perception, alter relationships, and cast shadows over lives in ways the truth cannot always anticipate. For Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and even Markus Anderson, rumors were never just background noise. They were a persistent force, a tidal wave of speculation that eroded privacy, sowed doubt, and complicated every interaction. And now, for the first time, Harry has chosen to confront these hidden truths head-on, peeling back layers of misconception to reveal what really happened behind closed doors. From the earliest days of his public life, Harry has been no stranger to rumor. Born into the most scrutinized family in the world, his actions, statements, and even facial expressions were dissected endlessly. But rumors about Meghan, Marcus, and the alleged intersections of their lives introduced an entirely new dimension. This was not just about Harry anymore. It was about the delicate web of relationships surrounding him, each strand vibrating with uncertainty and speculation. It started subtly. A misplaced comment in an interview. A photograph taken out of context. A social media post read with a hint of imagination. What seemed trivial to the casual observer became fodder for journalists, gossip bloggers, and online commentators. And as the speculation grew, so did the tension. Harry noticed it first, not in the headlines, but in Meghan's quiet moments of frustration, in Marcus's guarded responses, and in the subtle shifts in trust that ripple through any relationship touched by public scrutiny. Rumors, Harry realized, have a life of their own. They mutate, evolve, and often bear little resemblance to reality. One story might start as an innocent misunderstanding, perhaps Marcus being in the same room as Meghan at a charity event, but in the hands of the media, it becomes a dramatic narrative, complete with insinuation and imagined motives. For those living the story, this distortion is not harmless. It shapes perception, influences decisions, and often forces people into defensive stances that they would never otherwise adopt. What makes these rumors particularly dangerous, Harry reflects, is their subtlety. Not all are obvious lies. Many are half-truths, partially accurate observations twisted into scandalous conclusions. A conversation observed, a glance misread, a schedule coincidence. All become evidence of a narrative carefully constructed by the public without consent from those involved. And while some may dismiss this as trivial celebrity drama, Harry knows the emotional toll it takes. Every whisper chips away at trust, every insinuation breeds doubt, and every headline adds pressure to an already complex emotional landscape. Consider Markus Anderson's role. The rumors surrounding him were never just idle speculation. They had real consequences. Every public appearance with Meghan, every friendly exchange noted in the press, became fodder for conjecture. Some claimed impropriety. Others suggested tension, jealousy, or rivalry. And all of it, Harry notes, obscured the truth. Marcus's presence was often innocent, his intentions largely neutral, yet the perception of involvement amplified emotional strain and complicated relationships. Harry reflects on specific moments where rumors threatened to destabilize what he and Meghan were building together. A lunch meeting, a chance encounter, a shared professional circle, all misinterpreted as evidence of betrayal or intrigue. He describes feeling a mixture of frustration and helplessness, knowing that the world was constructing a narrative that could damage trust, distort intentions, and erode the foundation of his personal life. These were not mere distractions. They were emotional obstacles that required constant navigation, patience, and vigilance. And the rumors didn't stop there. Every new headline, every new insider tip brought fresh anxiety. Friends, family, and acquaintances all weighed in, each with their own perspective, amplifying the sense of chaos. Harry recalls times when even well-meaning advice became a source of tension, as differing interpretations of Marcus's role and Meghan's actions collided. He realized that the challenge was not simply addressing the rumors publicly. It was understanding their impact privately on relationships, emotions, and trust. Harry also acknowledges the role of irony in this situation. The very qualities that drew him to Meghan, Their intelligence, independence, and ability to navigate complex social landscapes also made her a target for rumor and misrepresentation. Marcus, enigmatic and charming, became a convenient focal point for speculation, and Harry, as the observer, partner, and participant, found himself caught between protecting privacy, managing perception, and confronting the emotional reality that these rumors created. What makes the hidden truths even more compelling, Harry notes, is the discrepancy between perception and reality. Public fascination often relies on simplification, an affair, a scandal, a betrayal. But real life is rarely so straightforward. Marcus's involvement, Meghan's intentions, and the dynamics between all parties are far more intricate than any headline could convey. By sharing his perspective, Harry seeks not only to clarify facts, but also to illuminate the emotional and psychological complexity behind the story. Some rumors were entirely fabricated, Harry admits, designed to generate clicks, controversy, and sensationalism. Others were born from misunderstanding, miscommunication, or assumptions based on incomplete information. But all of them contributed to a climate of tension, suspicion, and heightened emotional stakes. The challenge, he says, was distinguishing between falsehoods and realities, between meaningful interactions and coincidental appearances, and between perception and truth. This chapter of Harry's story is also a meditation on human psychology. Rumors exploit vulnerability, magnify insecurities, and distort behavior. Marcus's presence, Meghan's responses, and Harry's own reactions all interacted with these dynamics, creating a feedback loop in which perception shaped reality. Harry notes how difficult it was to maintain emotional clarity when the narrative outside the private circle diverged so sharply from lived experience. Every rumor required careful management, every whisper demanded reflection, and every public interaction became a high-stakes negotiation. And yet, there was a strange power in finally speaking out. By confronting these hidden truths, Harry hoped to reclaim agency, to assert his perspective, and to illuminate the reality behind the stories. He emphasizes that this is not about vindication or blame. It is about truth, clarity, and emotional honesty. The rumors, he admits, will not disappear entirely, but by providing context, insight, and first-hand account, he can shift perception closer to reality. The stakes, Harry explains, are deeply personal. The rumors were not just inconveniences, they were tests of loyalty, trust, and resilience. Markus Anderson, Meghan Markle, and Harry himself all faced scrutiny, suspicion, and emotional strain. The challenge was to navigate these pressures without losing sight of what mattered most: honesty, partnership, and emotional integrity. And every decision, every choice to remain silent or speak, carried consequences that echoed far beyond the immediate moment. As Harry recounts these hidden truths, he repeatedly returns to the same central theme: human complexity. Marcus's actions, Meghan's intentions, and his own responses cannot be reduced to headlines, social media posts, or gossip columns. They exist in a web of context, emotion, and circumstance that requires nuance, empathy, and reflection. And it is precisely this complexity that has made his silence both necessary and burdensome for so long. But now, as Harry prepares to reveal the details of these interactions, the hidden truths begin to converge. The rumors, the whispers, and the speculation take on new significance when placed alongside his first-hand experience. What was once misunderstood becomes illuminated. What was once dismissed becomes critical. And what was once hidden becomes central to understanding not only the story of Markus Anderson and Meghan Markle, but also the broader emotional landscape of Harry's life. Yet, even with this emerging clarity, questions remain unanswered. How did these rumors shape relationships? What were the consequences of misperception? And, most importantly, how did Harry and Meghan navigate the pressures of love, loyalty, and public scrutiny in a world that thrives on simplification and sensationalism? The answers to these questions are only just beginning to surface. And just as the audience begins to grasp the depth of the hidden truths, another layer emerges. One that promises to reveal not only the intricacies of interpersonal dynamics, but also the emotional fallout that would define the next chapters of this story. Because the story of rumors and hidden truths is far from over, and what comes next will force everyone involved to confront realities they could no longer ignore. An affair. The word alone carries weight, judgment, and instant intrigue. It is the kind of accusation that ignites headlines, fuels social media, and instantly polarizes public opinion. For Prince Harry, speaking about allegations of an affair involving Meghan Markle and Markus Anderson is not a decision made lightly. This is a story he has carried silently for years, a story colored by emotion, nuance, and the complexities of human relationships. And now, at 41, he has chosen to finally confront it. The rumors started quietly, almost imperceptibly. Social media whispers, obscure blog posts, and subtle references in gossip columns. But like all rumors, they grew, gaining momentum, until the word affair became attached to Markus's name and Meghan's. For outsiders, the narrative seemed simple. A scandalous liaison, a betrayal, and the inevitable fallout. But Harry knows the truth is never simple. The reality is layered, emotionally charged, and far more intricate than the media portrays. Harry begins by emphasizing a crucial distinction. Markus Anderson's involvement was never about malicious intent or deliberate betrayal. He was not a villain in a conventional sense. Yet, in the subtle shifts of attention, the charged interactions, and the moments that carried emotional resonance, the perception of an affair took root. It was a perception amplified by context, rumor, and the unrelenting scrutiny of millions of observers. And for Harry, living at the center of this storm, the emotional impact was profound. Imagine being in love, fully committed, and yet constantly confronted with insinuations that your partner is being unfaithful. Imagine feeling tension, doubt, and vulnerability amplified not by private experience, but by the public imagination. Harry describes it as a surreal, almost disorienting experience, like watching your private life unravel in real time while trying to protect the people you love most. Every glance, every message, every encounter became loaded with potential interpretation, and navigating that emotional minefield required both vigilance and emotional resilience. Harry's perspective on the affair allegations is rooted in observation, context, and first-hand experience. He recounts moments that, taken out of context, could easily be misinterpreted. A private conversation, a fleeting interaction, a shared laugh, elements that seem innocuous in isolation but, when amplified by rumor and speculation, become evidence in a narrative that distorts reality. Markus, in Harry's account, was often simply present. A part of social circles, professional gatherings, and charitable events, yet his presence was magnified by perception. What makes the situation more complex, Harry notes, is the interplay between intent and perception. Markus's actions, in isolation, may have been entirely innocent. But within the emotional ecosystem of Harry and Meghan's relationship, and under the microscope of public scrutiny, they became charged with meaning. And it is precisely this tension between reality and perception that fueled the rumors, creating a narrative that, while partially rooted in truth, ultimately obscured the emotional realities of the relationships involved. Harry also speaks candidly about the emotional toll this situation took on him. He recalls nights of uncertainty, moments of frustration, and the constant mental calculations required to navigate the line between trust and caution. Love, he explains, is rarely simple, especially when complicated by rumor, public scrutiny, and the ambiguous presence of a third party. Markus was never a villain, but he became a symbol of the emotional challenges Harry faced. The alleged affair was as much about perception, anxiety, and relational tension as it was about actions themselves. And then there is Meghan's role in all of this. Harry emphasizes that Meghan's intentions were never malicious. She did not seek to destabilize, manipulate, or betray. Her interactions with Markus were nuanced, layered with professional, social, and personal dimensions that outsiders cannot easily interpret. Harry's recounting paints a picture of a woman navigating complex social dynamics, asserting her independence, and managing relationships with grace under pressure. Yet, even with good intentions, perception can override reality, and that is where the allegations gained traction. The media, of course, seized on every opportunity to sensationalize. Headlines declared scandal, social media erupted, and public opinion swayed with each new whisper. But Harry's account seeks to clarify. The story is not about infidelity in a traditional sense. It is about proximity, perception, and the emotional impact of ambiguity. Markus's presence created moments that were emotionally charged, and those moments, when filtered through public speculation, became the foundation of the alleged affair narrative. Harry also reflects on the impact these allegations had on his relationship with Meghan. Trust, he notes, is resilient but not immune. The couple had to navigate not only external pressures but internal reflections, doubts, and conversations that tested the boundaries of their partnership. Markus, by virtue of his involvement, even if indirect, highlighted vulnerabilities that demanded attention, dialogue, and emotional work. The allegations were, in a sense, a catalyst for introspection, communication, and ultimately, growth within the relationship. One of the most striking aspects Harry shares is how rumor and perception can distort memory and interpretation. A moment that seemed minor in real time can, when viewed through the lens of public speculation, become monumental. He recounts specific instances where a brief interaction with Markus was later mischaracterized by observers, creating emotional tension that had to be addressed privately. These instances highlight the fragility of perception and the power of narrative in shaping reality. Harry is careful to contextualize the alleged affair within the broader pressures they faced: public scrutiny, intense media coverage, and the emotional demands of royal life. The combination of these forces created a fertile ground for rumor, speculation, and misinterpretation. Markus Anderson, in this context, was both a participant and a symbol, someone whose actions were amplified by circumstance, perception, and emotional resonance. Despite the gravity of the situation, Harry maintains a measured tone. He does not seek to vilify Markus or Meghan. Instead, he frames the narrative as a human story, complex, messy, and emotionally charged. The alleged affair is less about betrayal in the conventional sense and more about the dynamics of perception, trust, and relational pressure in a world where privacy is nearly impossible. And yet, the implications are undeniable. Allegations of infidelity, even when rooted in misunderstanding, have profound consequences. They shape public opinion, influence personal relationships, and create emotional stress that can be difficult to manage. Harry describes how navigating these allegations required not only patience and resilience, but also careful attention to communication, emotional boundaries, and the maintenance of trust within his most important relationships. As Harry's narrative unfolds, the reader, or viewer, is drawn into the emotional complexity of the situation. Markus's presence, Meghan's intentions, and Harry's responses create a layered, human story that goes far beyond sensational headlines. It is a story about perception versus reality, emotional navigation under extreme pressure, and the resilience of trust in the face of misunderstanding. And just as the narrative seems to settle into clarity, another element emerges, one that complicates the story further, introduces new tension, and sets the stage for the next revelation. Because in the world of Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and Markus Anderson, nothing is ever simple, and what appears to be the end of a story is often just the beginning. But what comes next, the ripple effects, the emotional fallout, and the consequences that no one anticipated, will change everything. The palace walls have always been thick, designed to shield, control, and maintain order. But even the strongest walls cannot contain scandal, whispers, and human emotion. When Prince Harry began to confront the truths he had carried silently, truths involving Meghan Markle and Markus Anderson, the reverberations were felt far beyond his personal life. They rippled through the corridors of the monarchy, creating tension, speculation, and what can only be described as royal fallout. Harry had long understood the power of the institution he was born into. The monarchy is not just a family, it is a symbol, a brand, a global spectacle. Every action taken within its walls is scrutinized, interpreted, and often weaponized. And yet, despite his upbringing, nothing could have fully prepared him for the intensity of scrutiny that would follow the revelations surrounding Meghan and Markus. The palace, he realized, operates not only on protocol but on perception, and perception, in the age of social media, can be far more damaging than reality. When the whispers of Markus Anderson began to intersect with the couple's private life, the palace's reaction was both subtle and strategic. Rumors were denied publicly, quietly investigated internally, and monitored for their potential impact on public image. But denial is never a full solution. Information, perception, and emotion find a way to leak, twist, and spread. Harry observed this firsthand. What begins as a minor concern can escalate into a full-blown narrative, amplified by reporters, bloggers, and social media commentators. The royal fallout was multifaceted. On one hand, there were personal tensions within the family itself, questions of loyalty, judgment, and protection. Some family members expressed concern for Meghan, worried about the public scrutiny she faced. Others were preoccupied with how Markus's presence and the alleged affair allegations could affect the monarchy's image. Every conversation, every private meeting, and every strategic decision became charged with the knowledge that the outside world was watching, analyzing, and forming conclusions. Harry describes the emotional strain of navigating this fallout as immense. He had to balance loyalty to his family, protection of Meghan, and his own emotional well-being, all while under the unrelenting gaze of the global public. Every decision carried consequences, and the stakes were extraordinarily high. Misstep, miscommunication, or misinterpretation could have long-term effects, not just on personal relationships, but on the institution itself. Media scrutiny added another layer of complexity. Every headline became a public debate, every rumor a potential crisis. The alleged involvement of Markus Anderson, whether accurate or not, became a focal point for sensationalist coverage. Outlets speculated, analyzed, and often distorted events, creating a feedback loop in which public perception pressured the palace to respond. For Harry, this meant constant vigilance, emotional resilience, and careful management of both private and public interactions. Within the palace, strategies were deployed to mitigate the fallout. Meetings, consultations, and carefully worded statements attempted to balance transparency with discretion. But Harry knew that no strategy could fully control the narrative. Once a story takes on a life of its own, particularly one involving love, rumor, and alleged betrayal, it becomes unpredictable, difficult to contain, and emotionally taxing for those at its center. The royal fallout also manifested in relationships. Trust, Harry realized, is fragile under pressure. Conversations that might have been routine became tense. Decisions that should have been private were scrutinized, and alliances shifted subtly as family members navigated the dual pressures of personal loyalty and institutional responsibility. Markus Anderson, inadvertently or otherwise, became a catalyst in this web of emotional and political complexity. His presence highlighted insecurities, vulnerabilities, and unspoken tensions within the family dynamic. Harry recalls specific moments of confrontation, private discussions, quiet warnings, and emotional exchanges that underscored the weight of the situation. These moments were not always dramatic in the traditional sense, but their impact was profound. Every word mattered. Every glance carried meaning. And every action had potential consequences for relationships, reputation, and emotional well-being. Beyond the palace walls, the public and media reaction intensified. Allegations, speculation, and rumors fueled debates across the globe. Social media exploded with commentary, judgment, and theory. The royal family, always acutely aware of public perception, found itself navigating a crisis that was both intensely personal and widely publicized. Harry describes the sensation as being caught in a pressure cooker where every emotional choice was magnified and every decision scrutinized. The fallout was not merely external, it was deeply personal. Harry and Meghan faced emotional strain that tested their relationship, resilience, and communication. Markus Anderson's role, whether perceived or real, became a mirror reflecting vulnerabilities and fears they had to confront together. The challenge was not simply responding to rumors or allegations. It was maintaining trust, connection, and emotional equilibrium under unprecedented scrutiny. Harry also notes the irony of royal life. The same institution designed to protect, support, and manage crises can sometimes exacerbate personal challenges. Protocols, media strategies, and public relations measures, while well-intentioned, often add layers of complexity to emotional realities. The royal fallout, Harry emphasizes, was as much about institutional dynamics as it was about personal relationships. Amid the chaos, moments of clarity emerged. Harry and Meghan learned to navigate not only the pressures of public perception, but also the subtle, intricate dynamics of family loyalty and trust. Markus Anderson's presence, the alleged affair rumors, and the palace's strategic responses all provided lessons in communication, emotional intelligence, and resilience. Yet, despite these lessons, the fallout continued, evolving and adapting with every new rumor, headline, and public reaction. And then there were the unseen consequences. The emotional toll that rarely reaches public view. Stress, anxiety, and the constant need to manage perception take their toll over time. Harry reflects on sleepless nights, private arguments, and the emotional labor required to protect both Meghan and his own well-being. Markus Anderson's involvement, while subtle, highlighted these challenges, forcing Harry to confront fears, insecurities, and the complexities of love under pressure. The royal fallout is also about timing. Events that seem minor in isolation can have cascading effects over weeks, months, or even years. A single misunderstanding, amplified by rumor and speculation, can create tension that resonates far beyond the initial moment. Harry emphasizes that understanding the timeline, context, and emotional resonance of events is critical to comprehending the true impact of Markus Anderson's presence and the alleged affair allegations. Yet, as intense as the fallout has been, Harry's account also highlights resilience. He and Meghan have navigated challenges with determination, emotional honesty, and a willingness to confront truths, even when uncomfortable. Markus Anderson's role, while a complicating factor, also provided opportunities for reflection, growth, and strengthening the bond between Harry and Meghan. The story of royal fallout is far from over. Every revelation, every clarification, every emotional decision creates ripples that affect relationships, perceptions, and the course of events. And just when it seems that the storm might settle, another wave emerges. Unexpected, challenging, and transformative. Because in the royal world, fallout is rarely final. And the next revelation, poised to expose emotional and personal consequences in ways no one anticipated, is about to change everything.